Hey guys, Technomentary with a video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone XS with the iPhone 6s Plus in a head-to-head comparison video where we take a look at the hardware, the software, overall performance of these two phones in 2021 running on iOS 14. We're going to break down everything for you guys that you need to know, whether you're upgrading from the 6s Plus to the XS or if you're just looking to see what might be a better option and why you would buy either one. Stay tuned in this video, we'll discuss all of that. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market for one of the newer phones like the iPhone XS or iPhone 11, 12, any of the newer ones and looking to get a discount, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section where we have a link to the discounted iPhones that you can buy currently. So let's go ahead and dive into today's video. First thing first is the release date of these two phones. The iPhone 6s here debuted in 2015 around the September timeframe where Apple releases its flagship phone, and then 3 years later the iPhone XS here was debuted as well, and a lot has changed between these devices. As you can see here, of course, right off the bat, the display itself and everything else that goes along with it. Well, first thing we want to take a look at the back here. So you kind of start looking at the differences. You notice the iPhone 6s compared to the XS looks really huge in terms of comparison. Well, that's because the XS is not actually a good comparison for the plus sizes or the max sizes. As you know, Apple has moved away from using the plus terminology like they have done with the iPhone 6, 7, and 8. They moved away from that, and starting with the XS, they started calling the Max version. So you have the XS Max, you have 11 Pro Max, 12 Pro Max. It's a kind of a naming change that they have done, but it's something we want to discuss between these two phones. The other differences you'll notice, of course, the feature of the cameras, the iPhone XS with that dual 12 megapixel camera versus that just one single 12 megapixel camera, of course, that's on the iPhone XS versus the Plus here. And then the other noticeable things around these phones you'll notice is the actual label here, where the iPhone XS just has the word iPhone and the iPhone 6s Plus here has that logo along with some writing. That S here denotes it's the S model of the iPhone 6s Plus. There's also a 6 Plus, which is different from the 6s Plus. So a lot of people get confused with that, but the 6s Plus is different from the iPhone 6 Plus, and that's how you determine it, that little S that you see on the back. And of course, the other thing we want to talk about between these two phones are the build material between these two devices. Of course, in the front, we saw both of the phones here are both glass front, but there's different build material. The iPhone XS here has a surgical grade stainless steel body with front and back both being glass, where the iPhone 6s Plus here has aluminum body here, and with the aluminum body, unfortunately, you cannot do wireless charging. That glass back on the XS allows you to do wireless charging, so that's a feature enhancement for the XS. Of course, in a comparison video, we get a look at the body sizes. You'll notice the different size body because of the regular versus the plus size one between it. And what sort of weight can you expect out of these two phones? Well, they weigh similarly, just different because of the plus size of it. The iPhone XS here weighs around 177 gram or 6.24 ounce compared to the iPhone 6s Plus, which weighs around 6.55 or 192 grams, a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier. Of course, that's the reason. And moving on to the other comparison of these phones is the display. There's a lot to talk about the display. Of course, you see when you compare the display side by side, you'll notice although the XS is smaller body, it has bigger real estate when it comes to display compared to the 6s Plus. So although it's a smaller phone, you're getting a lot more out of that feature. And things to talk about on the iPhone XS is that OLED display that it has. It has a 5.8-inch diagonal all-screen OLED compared to the 6s Plus, which is a 5.5 diagonal widescreen LCD display with IPS technology. And along with that display itself, we want to talk about sort of the Retina HD display. Both of them does have Retina, but on the iPhone XS, Apple named it Super Retina. What that really means, we're not quite sure, but it's something that is different between these two devices. And the other thing you'll notice around display that has changed is the resolution. Thanks to that OLED, you have that HDR display. You have 2436 by 1125 pixel resolution at 458 ppi compared to the iPhone 6s. Because of that LCD display, it has around 1920 by 1080 pixel resolution at 401 ppi. Along with that, are the other big difference along with these two phones, or that contrast ratio. It's something you'll notice when you're really looking for a more clear picture. The iPhone XS here has almost 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio compared to the iPhone 6s, which has merely 1,300 to 1 contrast ratio between it. And lastly, one thing we want to talk about when you talk about display is the brightness you get out of it. So the iPhone 6s here gives you 500 nit of max brightness compared to the XS, which gives you 625 bright nit that you get. So of course the OLED allows you to go higher in density for the brightness. So brighter phone would be your iPhone XS. And let's talk about this other feature. Of course, in the front, you cannot miss the fact that the iPhone 6s has the iconic legacy sort of home button or the Touch ID. The iPhone XS here has what's known Face ID, so you use your face to do your recognition compared to the 6s. So it's something you probably would want to set up in your Face ID, where you set up your face and you can unlock your phone. But that could be a good or bad thing. Apple did rumor to seem to possibly on the iPhone 13 or the later device that they might have an on all-screen display, might have a virtual fingerprint reader, which could really help because sometimes it's tougher when you have a face mask to have your phone be unlocked and you're going to be entering your passcode. And let's talk about the build of it is around water resistivity of these two phones. What kind of water resistivity does these two phones have? Well, the iPhone 6s unfortunately is not water resistant at all, so you can't be taking it for a dive. On the other hand, iPhone XS has an IP rated of IP67, which allows it to go to 2 meters up to 30 minutes. So you're able to do that, and it also has dust resistivity in this. So bigger, better build, of course, because of the improved hardware of it. And let's talk about this other interesting aspect about it that you want to know between these two phones, or the battery life. So has Apple improved the battery life since the release of the 6s between these two phones? Unfortunately not. Surprisingly, the iPhone 6s Plus here has a 2750 mAh battery compared to the iPhone XS, which has a 2658 mAh. So almost 100 mAh bigger on the iPhone 6s Plus, and it needs that because it's a bigger phone and it needs more power. Of course, the OLED here also consumes a lot of battery power as well. And if you take both of them into consideration, they give you about the same hour of video playback, around 14 hours between the two devices. So if you're looking for a phone with a better battery, the lasting in terms of video playback, purely on that comparison, both of the phones are pretty much equivalent of 14 hours each between these two devices. And let's talk about the final aspect around hardware is the chip. This is going to be really important if you're playing heavy graphic games, because you want to know what kind of chip you're going to get between these two phones. Is that the iPhone XS, of course, has a better chip because it came out a little bit later. On the iPhone 6s Plus came out with the A9 chip, and then 3 generations later, Apple released the A12 Bionic chip, much faster in terms of performance and such. We'll talk about a little bit in the software of how fast that really means and what kind of CPU you can expect. Like heavy graphic gaming is where you look at those fact. And then let's talk about the camera. Of course, something we don't want to miss between these two phones. We discussed that lightly in the beginning of the video. You have dual versus the single, and that makes a lot of difference when it comes to camera. If we open up camera between these two devices, you'll notice there is a lot going on. Of course, the portrait mode unfortunately is not available on the iPhone on 6s. So all of these studio lighting, contour lighting, stage lighting that you get that really enhances that experience of photography are not available on the iPhone 6s Plus here. Things like the square mode is the only feature that you're missing on the iPhone 10s. Not sure why Apple has gone away with it. And of course, between these other devices, you have slow motion, time lapse, all of that. But the one thing we want to talk about is the actual digital zoom on it. The iPhone 10s here has 2 times the zoom, where the iPhone 6s Plus does not have that zoom. Along with that, you're limited to recording on the iPhone 6s. You're able to record at 4K at one setting, which is 30 frames per second. That's the only feature that you have around video recording. Unlike that, the iPhone 10s here goes from 720 all the way up to 4K at 60 frames per second. So a lot more going on. It also has the stereo grade speakers and system. So if you're looking to record or do a lot of video on that, the iPhone 10s of course has better camera. That is what Apple is known to do with every release of newer phone. They go ahead and improve the camera. That's because of the fan base looking for cameras. And let's talk about the software between these two phones. As you notice, both of the phones are sporting the iPhone. On these phones are iOS 14. So both of the phones does get iOS 14. The iPhone 6 Plus, not the 6s Plus here, does not get the iOS 14 updates. That's one thing you'll probably notice, is that the 6s is probably at the end of life. We don't expect it to get iOS 15 because Apple did stretch the 6s lineup. The 6s and 6s Plus are at the end, and they pretty much don't have what Apple claims to be enough hardware to support the next generation of update on it. And on the other hand, the iPhone 10s here is probably going to be supported for another 2 to 3 years. So if you're looking for a phone that you want for a couple more years, you're going to have to go with the 10s, because the 6s Plus will not get these update. One thing we noticed around these two phones is that most of the popular apps on both of the apps work phenomenally, from your social media to your gaming, your entertainment. Even if you're using it for maybe watching Netflix, Prime Videos, Disney Plus, we find that on the OLED display it definitely does create a lot more going on there. Your quality is more or better, in a way to put it is the crystal clear images that you get that's not available on the iPhone 6s Plus. So because of that OLED, things are a lot more clear versus that LCD display you have. And aside that, all of your everyday shopping apps like eBay, Amazon, all of those are working. Your Grubhub, Uber Eats, anything you use on a daily, because iOS 14 supports all of that. It's the latest update. You're not going to have any issues between these two devices. And finally, let's talk about what sort of expectation different between these two phones that we can expect. So one thing to note is, why would you buy one or the other? A couple of reasons. Why would you buy first with the iPhone 6s in 2021, or why would you even keep using this phone? Well, this phone, for example, it supports iOS 14, so you're not limited to just using that itself. One thing you'll notice between these two phones, the 6s Plus does have a little bit more power, around 3.5% more battery power to it, because it has a bigger battery. It still has that fingerprint reader, so if you still miss Apple removing that fingerprint reader and still want a phone, you have the 6s. You also have sort of that thinner body, and the battery life for standby actually is better on the iPhone 6s Plus by 3 hours more. So if you're comparing it, the iPhone, on the battery life of talk and text time, you're getting a little bit better quality in that aspect. And lastly, the price, because the iPhone 6s Plus has been around, it's been over 5.5 years. This phone you can probably get around $150 compared to the iPhone 10s, which you're paying almost $400 or $500. So you're paying $300-$400 more. So if you're looking for a budget-friendly phone running the latest iOS, but don't mind that it will be probably supported for another year and it's at the end of life, and don't mind it being a little bit slower, not having that OLED or a better camera. The iPhone 6s Plus might still be a fine phone to use because it is budget friendly and still has a lot of unique features to it. On the other hand, why would you get the iPhone 10s? Here, there's a couple reasons. Of course, we have discussed that OLED allows the phone to have almost a 14% higher pixel density to it. It has almost 32% higher resolution as well. It has a 3.1 times faster CPU thanks to that 2 gig of extra RAM compared to the iPhone 6s Plus. You also have a 5.5% bigger screen. Although iPhone 6s Plus is supposed to be bigger size, it doesn't mean more or screen space. And it also has 40% more megapixel in its front camera, which is one aspect we didn't talk about because it's 7 megapixel versus 5 megapixel on the 6s Plus. So a lot more going on because it is a 3-year older phone, but you're paying the price of it, and it's still probably, if you're comparing to buy these two phones or even any iPhone, the iPhone 10s actually packs a lot of punch compared to even the iPhone 12 lineup, and you're getting almost at the half the price you would pay for a 12 Pro. So our conclusion of these two phones, there you have it. Hopefully this video is helpful. We also want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think between these two devices? If you're either using one or the another or upgraded to another, one from another, leave a comment in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.